Good day, everyone. Imagine this for a moment. You spend your entire life trying to outrun a nightmare.
Every decision you make, every road you take, every sacrifice you endure is designed to prevent one horrifying prophecy from coming true.
And then one day you discover something unbearable. The prophecy came true precisely because you tried to escape it.
Now imagine something even worse. You are leading a murder investigation. You are determined to find the criminal. You question witnesses. You examine evidence.
You follow every clue with relentless determination. And then, piece by piece, you discover that the murderer you are hunting is none other than yourself.
That is the terrifying genius of Sophocles' Oedipus Tyrannos, also known as Oedipus Rex.
More than 24 centuries after it was first performed beneath the open sky of Athens, this play still grips readers, scholars, psychologists, philosophers, and theater audiences with astonishing power.
Many critics have called it the greatest tragedy ever written. Aristotle, the most influential literary theorist in history, considered it the finest example of tragic art. But why? Why does a story written in ancient Greece still feel so modern? Why does the downfall of a ruler in mythical Thebes continue to speak to an age of science, technology, forensic investigation, and psychological self-discovery?
To answer those questions, we must travel back to 5th century BC Athens and enter the world that produced one of humanity's greatest dramatic masterpieces. When most people think about ancient theater, they imagine a quiet cultural event, a few actors, some poetry, a respectable audience.
Perhaps something similar to a modern evening at the theater. Nothing could be further from the truth. In classical Athens, theater was not merely entertainment. It was politics, it was religion, it was philosophy, it was civic education, and above all, it was a public confrontation with society's deepest fears.
Imagine over 14,000 citizens gathered together in the theater of Dionysus. Generals sit beside farmers, politicians beside craftsmen, rich and poor alike, all watching stories that challenge their assumptions about justice, leadership, morality, destiny, and human suffering. Greek tragedy functioned almost like a public laboratory of ideas.
The stage became a place where Athenians could examine difficult questions. What happens when human intelligence collides with divine power? Can reason solve every problem?
How much control do we really possess over our lives? And what should a society do when catastrophe strikes? These questions were not abstract. They were painfully immediate. Sophocles probably presented Oedipus Tyrannos sometime between 429 and 425 BCC. The timing is crucial. Athens was experiencing one of the darkest periods in its history. The city was locked in the devastating Peloponnesian War against Sparta. At the same time, an epidemic known today as the Plague of Athens was tearing through the population. The consequences were catastrophic. Tens of thousands died, families were shattered, social order began to fracture. Even Pericles, the city's most celebrated statesman, succumbed to the disease. Now think about the opening of Oedipus. Thebes is dying, the land is diseased, children are dying, women are dying, the city is overwhelmed by suffering. For the original audience, this was not mythology, this was reality. The stage was reflecting their own nightmare back to them. The tragedy was not occurring in some distant legendary past. It was unfolding in front of them, wearing the mask of myth. Whenever we discuss Sophocles, we often praise his psychological insight. And rightly so. His characters feel astonishingly real. Their fears, ambitions, frustrations, and emotional conflicts remain recognizable even today. But Sophocles was more than a great storyteller. He was a dramatic engineer, a revolutionary technician of theater. To appreciate his genius, we need to understand what Greek tragedy looked like before him. Earlier playwrights, such as Aeschylus, typically relied on two actors. One character speaks, another responds. The dramatic movement resembles a debate. Sophocles changed everything. He introduced a third actor. At first glance, that may sound like a minor innovation. In reality, it transformed theater forever. With three actors on stage, entirely new dramatic possibilities emerged. Now a character could listen silently while two others argued. Now secrets could circulate unevenly. Now dramatic tension could arise from what one character knew and another did not. Now complex psychological interactions became possible. In many ways,
Sophocles helped create the foundations of dramatic realism itself.
He also broke away from another important tradition. Earlier tragedians often composed connected trilogies, 3 plays forming one enormous narrative arc.
Sophocles preferred self-contained masterpieces. Every tragedy had to generate its own momentum. Every scene had to matter. Every revelation had to drive the action forward. The result is astonishing. OEDIPUS Tyrannos moves with the precision of a modern thriller. There are no unnecessary detours, no wasted scenes, no narrative excess.
Everything drives relentlessly toward a single devastating revelation. And that revelation will change everything.
The play begins with one of the most powerful openings in all literature. Before us stands a city in agony. Thebes is dying. The air is filled with prayers.
Priests kneel before the palace. Citizens beg for help. The future of the city hangs in the balance. And then OEDIPUS appears.
Notice something important. The people do not simply respect him. They almost revere him. To understand why, we must remember the event that made him famous.
Years earlier, Thebes had been terrorized by the Sphinx, part woman, part lion, part bird, a creature who challenged travelers with a deadly riddle. Failed to answer correctly, and you died.
The riddle was deceptively simple. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening?
No one could solve it. No priest, no prophet, no king, no scholar. Then came OEDIPUS. Using nothing except his own intellect, he answered, man.
As a baby, a human crawls on 4 limbs. As an adult, walks on 2. In old age, relies upon a cane as a 3rd leg. The Sphinx was defeated. Thebes was saved.
And OEDIPUS became its ruler. Now here we encounter one of the most important linguistic details in the entire play. Most readers know the work by its Latin title, OEDIPUS REX, King OEDIPUS. But Sophocles did not call it that. His original title was OEDIPUS Tyrannos. And that distinction matters enormously. A basileus is a hereditary king, a ruler by birth, a ruler by bloodline. A Tyrannos, however, acquires power through personal achievement, talent, force, or exceptional ability. OEDIPUS did not inherit Thebes. He earned it. He solved the impossible riddle.
He saved the city. He rose through merit. In many ways, he resembles the modern self-made leader. He trusts intelligence, evidence, action. Most importantly, he trusts himself.
And that confidence becomes the engine of the tragedy. Because the man who once solved the riddle of the Sphinx is about to confront a far greater mystery. A mystery no intellect can easily solve.
The mystery of his own identity. And as Sophocles brilliantly understands, the most difficult person for any human being to truly know is often himself.
From this moment forward, OEDIPUS Tyrannos transforms into something astonishingly modern. It becomes a forensic investigation, a detective story,
A procedural drama written more than 2 millennia before the invention of detective fiction. And at the center of this investigation stands OEDIPUS himself.
Now, consider what drives him. He is not passive. He is not hesitant. He does not wait for fate to unfold. He actively interrogates it.
When the oracle of Apollo declares that Thebes will only be saved if the murderer of King Laius is found and expelled, OEDIPUS does not flinch. He does not question the gods.
He does not delay. He issues a public proclamation, a curse, a legal order, a moral declaration. Whoever killed Laius must be expelled from Thebes, no matter who they are.
Even if they are close to him, even if they are sheltered by power, even if they are himself.
And here we encounter one of Sophocles' most devastating ironies. OEDIPUS speaks like a judge, but he is also the accused, prosecutor and criminal, savior and disease.
The gap between what he knows and what the audience knows becomes unbearable. This is dramatic irony. Every act of justice is quietly steering him towards self-destruction.
At the center of Greek tragedy stands a figure who completely overturns our assumptions about knowledge. Tyrannos, the blind prophet of Apollo.
He enters the stage not as a marginal character, but as a living paradox. He cannot see the physical world, yet he sees the truth of existence more clearly than anyone else.
OEDIPUS, by contrast, has perfect sight, yet he is completely blind. When Tiresias is summoned, OEDIPUS expects clarity. Instead, he receives resistance. The prophet refuses to speak, not because he does not know, but because he knows too much. Truth in Sophocles is not always liberating.
Sometimes it is destructive, unbearable, and sometimes silence is the only form of mercy left. But OEDIPUS interprets silence as betrayal,
impatient, intellectual.
He accuses Tiresias of conspiracy, of political manipulation, of treason. And in response, Tiresias finally speaks the sentence that fractures the entire play.
You are the murderer you seek. At that moment, the structure of reality begins to crack. But Oedipus refuses to accept it. He rejects prophecy, divine knowledge. He trusts only reason, only evidence, only himself. And in doing so, he tightens the trap around his own identity.
At this point, we must correct one of the most widespread misunderstanding in literary interpretation: the idea of the tragic flaw.
For generations, it has been told that Oedipus falls because of excessive pride, hubris, arrogance, moral blindness. But this interpretation, while popular, is only partially accurate and often misleading.
Aristotle does not use the term tragic flaw in the Poetics. Instead, he uses hamartia. Now, this word is crucial. In its original Greek sense, it does not mean moral corruption, evil, or psychological defect.
It means to miss the mark. Like an archer whose arrow does not land where intended, a failure of precision, a misalignment between intention and outcome.
Oedipus does not destroy himself because he is wicked. He destroys himself because he is mistaken. He acts on incomplete information.
He kills a stranger at a crossroads without knowing the stranger is his father. He marries a queen without knowing she is his mother.
At every stage, his decisions are rational relative to what he knows. And that is precisely what makes the tragedy so devastating. Sophocles is not showing us a villain punished for wrongdoing. He is showing us a human being destroyed by the limits of knowledge itself.
Now the play accelerates. The structure tightens. The investigation deepens. And two separate streams of truth begin moving toward collision.
First, Jocasta intervenes. She tries to calm Oedipus, to dismiss prophecy as unreliable. She recounts the old oracle that foretold Laius would be killed by his own son,
and how they attempted to prevent it by abandoning their infant child on a mountainside.
The assumption is simple. Prophecy failed. The gods were wrong. Case closed.
But tragedy never closes cases so easily, because at the same time, a messenger arrives from Corinth, and he brings news that appears comforting.
King Polybus is dead. The man Oedipus believed to be his father has died naturally. Therefore, the prophecy that Oedipus would kill his father must be false.
Relief enters the stage. Hope returns. The logic seems complete. But Sophocles is preparing the final mechanism of collapse.
Because the messenger then reveals something he never intended to reveal. Oedipus was not the son of Polybus. He was adopted. He was found as an abandoned child.
His ankles were bound. A shepherd gave him away. And that shepherd is still alive. At this moment, knowledge stops being gradual. Aristotle reserves his highest praise for a specific kind of dramatic structure, one where two critical moments occur simultaneously. Peripeteia, a reversal of fortune, and Anagnorisis, recognition of truth. In most narratives, these occur separately. A character first learns something, then later experiences consequences. But in Oedipus Tyrannos, Sophocles fuses them into a single instant. The moment Oedipus discovers who he is the moment his entire world collapses.
There is no delay, no buffer, no psychological distance. Truth does not arrive gently, it strikes. The final shepherd is brought forward. The testimony is extracted.
Piece by piece, the entire structure of Oedipus's life is reconstructed and then destroyed. He is not merely a king who loses his throne. He is a man whose entire identity is revealed to have been built on accidental murder, forbidden marriage, and unknowable origins. At the climax, Oedipus cries out, "All is true."
And then he runs into the palace. What happens inside the palace is not shown on stage. Greek tragedy often relies on offstage catastrophe, but its consequences are visible. Jocasta takes her own life, unable to endure the revelation, and Oedipus, upon discovering her body, performs the most symbolic act in the entire play. He blinds himself. Using the golden pins of her garments, he destroys his own eyes. But this act is not merely punishment, it is transformation, a physical embodiment of inner truth. He had sight without knowledge. Now he has knowledge without sight. He chooses exile. He chooses suffering. He chooses to live with what he now knows. And in doing so, the audience experiences what Aristotle calls catharsis, not simple emotional release, but a structured confrontation with pity and fear.
Pity for a man whose intelligence could not save him. Fear for a world where knowledge is always incomplete. Fear that no matter how rational we become, something essential may always remain hidden.
So why does Oedipus Tyrannus remain one of the most powerful texts ever written? Because it is not simply about fate, prophecy, or ancient religion. It is about the limits of human knowing. Oedipus is not a distant mythological king. He is an archetype of modern consciousness. The thinker who believes reason can solve everything. The investigator who trusts evidence completely. The leader who assumes intelligence guarantees control. And Sophocles quietly dismantles that confidence. Because even the most brilliant mind cannot see everything, cannot know everything, cannot escape the structural limits of human understanding. In the end, Oedipus does not fail because he stops searching. He fails because he continues searching all the way to the truth. And that is why this tragedy still speaks to us. Because it asks a question we have never fully answered. What happens when the truth we are seeking turns out to be ourselves? If you enjoyed this lecture, please support the channel. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our future literature lectures. Until next time, keep reading critically and thinking deeply. Thank you for watching.